Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you to Michelle and David for inviting me to speak today. As Michelle said, I'm the Catchments Initiative Lead at Thames Water, and I'm here today to talk to you about our Smarter Water Catchments programme, which is an AMP7 initiative, but a lot of the pre-work has already begun for that. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about how it sort of came about and why there's a need for change, and how data and evidence is sort of essential to ensuring its delivery. So when it comes to catchment management, this is nothing new. It's certainly nothing new for any water company. We've been doing it a very long time. It's predominantly looking at single issues. So you take, for example, metaldehyde into water treatment works and the cost associated with removing it, and sort of work back up the catchment and do initiatives with farmers to, I guess, as a more cost beneficial option and remove it from its source. There are a couple of other sort of interventions that are on there. That one that I just mentioned about working with Network Rail to remove herbicides from railway lines. It's been going since the 1990s, so just gives you the sense of how long we've been doing these initiatives. But they tend to have sort of one WFD driver associated to them, and are quite easily measured in terms of success from a sort of off-what point of view as well. So as I was saying, these are typically focused on those single issues, but as we sort of move into a world which has quite a few more challenges to do with population growth, climate change, and changes in consumer behaviour, which also goes under the radar sometimes, there are lots of sort of pressures that get put on the catchment, and it's making it even more difficult to focus on these sort of single issues, and without sort of progressing and realising benefits of doing things by joining things up together. So to give you a sense of scale, we've got an additional 2 million people moving into our catchment by 2045, so that's sort of equivalent of Birmingham and Glasgow moving into the London and Thames Valley region. So in terms of thinking differently about how you might go about tackling these challenges, you sort of look towards the people that would be interested in seeing change here. We at Thames Water have been involved with a catchment-based approach. It's quite fair to say on an ad hoc basis to date. It's quite sporadic, and we will dip in and out of catchment partnerships depending if there are issues to do with pollution, but that's not the way that we want to do things. We want to set up something which is a bit more systematic and can provide, that two-way conversation, not just for us feeding out the things that are going on within the catchment, but also taking in ideas as well about, I guess, better ways of doing things. So the CaBA model is something which we very much are looking to use and enhance, but we recognise that there are certain hurdles. We heard about them earlier from David around the kind of regulatory sort of landscape and funding models that allow for things to happen. So there's certainly still some challenges there, but we're looking to this model to sort of overcome them. In terms of planning for the future, appreciate those things are quite small, but I can send out the link via Michelle when she sends around the content to you. We've, along with all the other water companies and wastewater companies across the country, put together business plans and submitted those to Offwhat for review. It's fair to say that this would probably be the most ambitious plan to date. We've got some really stretching targets in there. We've got a lot of increased investment and enhanced investment into improving bigger stretches of river. We've got biodiversity net gain in there. We're starting to pull in natural capital as well. Ambitions to educate every school child, cleaning up outfalls. So in terms of the kind of language that we're sort of using, we're moving into this space where we are really sort of wanting to prioritise that protecting, enhancing the environment as a key thing. And something which, for the first time, and why I'm here to speak to you today, is about this Smarter Water Catchments initiative. So this goes beyond those regulatory sort of drivers that we have to do. It goes beyond that. It looks at stacking different sources of funding together and saying, you know, how are you planning on achieving all of these things within a catchment, and really sort of having a rethink about how we set up that structure and framework to deliver it. So the Smarter Water Catchments initiative is essentially, the ethos is about looking at those multiple benefits that we can achieve together if we recognise the environment as a system. So just for sense of scale, we've got 24 different catchment partnerships across our region. Oh gosh. Let's go back to... We've got 24 different catchment partnerships in our region. We've selected 3 of those to do this sort of more holistic, integrated catchment management as a starter, but it's very much our ambition to increase that as we move into the next AMP period. So what do these look like? The top 3, as I was saying, are those whole catchment initiatives, and they will be measured by a bespoke performance commitment. So we are committing to delivering those as a water company, and will accept a financial penalty if we don't. So just reiterating that we're serious about doing this. We are planning on doing 3 additional projects as well, which are looking at other kind of research aspects to do with supporting abstraction, looking at how you might integrate water resources and flooding management as well. And the key to this is that we're working with each of the catchment partnerships and interested stakeholders in the region. So just to give you a quick overview and a bit of a deep dive. So if you take the West London one, which is in the Crane Valley, it cuts across 5 different local authorities, and there are some significant challenges that we've got as a water company for this catchment, particularly around Mogden sewage treatment works. So that sewage treatment works is completely landlocked. You cannot build a bigger works. You either build up or you build down. So we need to look at innovative ways of perhaps slowing down the flow, sustainable drainage systems, because a lot of that treated flow, well, in the combined system in London, it is presenting quite a bit of an issue. So in terms of looking differently about these challenges, we're working with the 5 local authorities, we're working with groups that we'll hear about today, and some of the work that ZSL are doing with Force and Outfall safaris to tackle misconnections. But essentially, we've got a problem, and we recognise that there are other issues as well within the catchments, and how can we come together to perhaps achieve some mutual benefits. So when it comes to creating smarter water catchments, I guess the first step would be about engaging with those partners and really getting to understand the views and the different perspectives of those views. The bit that's sort of fundamental and key to all of this is about that baseline. There is no point doing all of these activities if we cannot measure them and we cannot measure their success. We need that fundamental baseline. So if that means kind of going and above and beyond our duties as a water company to start measuring that, we really want to have this sort of system plan of each of these three catchments, so we can actually see what difference it's made in different parameters. So, you know, not just the typical kind of water quality ones as well. Once we've kind of got that full view of the system, we will then look to co-create very similarly with the catchment plans and just making sure that those are aligning, but then also looking to bring in additional sources of funding. We know that catchment partnerships are very successful at, you know, bringing in other pots of money, but perhaps, you know, if we could enhance that in some way and look to others as well to increase that, it would also be very beneficial. And then again, measuring the benefits over a period of time. We're keen for these plans to go beyond the AMP cycle. We have written as part of the performance commitment to have a 10-year plan, which is something which kind of steps out of that that planning process, because we recognise that to see some of these benefits, it's not going to be on that 5-year time scale. We need to go above and beyond. And Outfall have been very receptive to that, and have given us essentially the green light on the programme. But ultimately, we're waiting for sign-off in December. So looking at building this evidence baseline, so for those 3 catchments that I highlighted on the map, we're working with a consultant to build the natural capital baseline. So that is in the format of ArcGIS online. That is that story maps. That is open access. I really want to share that with as many people as possible. It pulls in all different layers from different sources. We've fed into it as well in terms of our data. That's for the programme, but appreciate that there are 21 other catchments within our region and our patch, and I'm very keen to work with the Rivers Trust in terms of giving as much data as possible to be able to show that to others as well. So yeah, looking at assets, boundaries, projects where we're enhancing the environment. I appreciate you've got the WINET programme on there, but looking at CSOs and things, we want to get to a place where we're being very transparent with what's going on, and that data, it's all there under an EIR request. You have access to it, so why can't we just make it a little bit easier to inform decision making? And part of this evidence baseline is we have put a lot of emphasis on citizen science. We recognise that there are resource challenges, and what better way to get involved with the local community than to guide them in the right direction, give them training on collecting certain bits of information which will provide us with a bit more of an informed view of our rivers. I think that's really important, and I know that others at Thames Water do agree with me too. So in terms of outputs and what they kind of look like, I'm very keen for it to be quite map-based and share with you some of the layers. All the pictures are quite fuzzy, but I'm hoping that they'll be better quality when they send them over to you. If anyone wants any more information on that, then by all means do send that across to me. As part of the kind of sharing the information, we need to do a bit of internal alignment as well. We need to be able to get everything in the right format to be able to share with you very easily. So I've been doing a piece of work collating all of that information and putting it on an internal app. So very fuzzy, but this basically shows the whole of the surface water outfall programme, and the larger the blobs, the more misconnected properties that were associated to that particular outfall. So there's things we've got to consider around kind of data protection and things like that, but in terms of sort of that spatial understanding of where the key issues are, that's certainly something that we want to convey and get across to people. But then also appreciating that evidence is not just numbers and figures, it can also be thoughts and feedback as well. So we want to make sure we're trying to capture that evidence as well. So in terms of next steps for the project, so in terms of go live, that will be happening April 2020. So this current bit of the process has all been on the goodwill of people in terms of meetings and discussing and trying to tease out for the last 12 months sort of what are the key kind of key issues that people are trying to address within their catchments. And it might be that they vary from catchment to catchment, but we want to be able to pull out those overarching themes to be able to create a framework that we can roll out across the board. This is something that was created by the Evenlode Catchment Partnership. It looks at it's like a story map, and they come and sort of draw your meeting for you. It's quite clear what some of the issues are with this. So from that, we're going to formalise up our catchment plan. So in the process of doing that at the moment across all of the catchments that we're working with. But yes, so Smarter Water Catchments is an AMP7 project. But there is certainly opportunity to cover, additional data and evidence sharing across all of the other catchments too. Thank you.
So this is Mark Mulligan from King's College, and his colleague Sophia Burke from Ambiotech, they have developed some low-cost monitoring solutions and platforms. Now, the whole video is 12 minutes long. I'm not going to play it all. We'll play to about 6 minutes, slightly breaking our own 5-minute rule, but we'll share the link for the full video with you afterwards.
This is a short introduction to FreeStation and to the SMART platform for real-time monitoring, early warning and analysis using low-cost open source sensors. So what is FreeStation? We know that ground-based monitoring infrastructure has been declining globally over the last decades, as we see in this diagram here of numbers of weather stations. And this is because of the cost of these in terms of maintenance, but also the fact that some of these data are being replaced by remote sensing data. And at the same time, we really do need these kinds of data more and more, and so it's unfortunate that this infrastructure is declining around the world. However, technical barriers to do-it-yourself data logging, do-it-yourself sensing, have fallen over the last decade in particular with the generation of low-cost microprocessors such as Arduino, Raspberry Pi, Internet of Things, connected devices, 3D printing, and low-cost electronic components available on websites such as eBay. FreeStation project, which has been going for some 6 years now, is a set of designs for low cost, and that's around 3% of the commercial cost of most of these instruments, but robust, accurate, do-it-yourself environmental monitoring equipment, which is also open source, and the FreeStation Live stations are internet connected anywhere in the world. They're available for monitoring a range of variables from river stage through meteorological variables to soil moisture and a whole bunch of other things, including water quality and so on. Cheaply, accurately and robustly. And because of the low cost, of course, they can be deployed at many sites instead of just one site, and really capture the geographical heterogeneity that exists out there in the landscape. These are designed to be built by geography students rather than engineers, so they can really be built and maintained by anyone with basic skills. And alongside a web platform, we therefore have a turnkey monitoring solution. You build the station, you plug in the battery, it connects to the internet, and you have a whole suite of analysis and graphical tools for analyzing the data. These sensors can also link with and provide data to some of our spatial models like Waterworld and EcoActuary, which are web-based spatial models to go beyond what's possible with monitoring. Here are some example stations. We have data loggers that are just a few instruments, smaller like this. This one does temperature, humidity, air pressure and river stage using a sonar, through to full weather stations. And we have stations that are usable where there are no telephony networks, no 3G, no 2G. We call those local stations. They write to SD cards, and then we have stations that write their data directly through the internet. We call those the live stations. We have more than 350 of these now operating in 16 countries in a variety of landscapes, and hosted by a variety of institutions, from farmers through to major research institutions. And they are sending in data to our servers every hour, measuring data every 10 minutes. The server side of this technology is as important as the sensor side of the technology, and this is the basis of the Internet of Things, that through the connection of these live sensors, you see a stage sensor here next to a leaky dam, you see a soil moisture sensor here that's looking at conservation agriculture versus traditional conventional tillage. These sensors connect directly into our smart system, and that system is a suite of online tools that allows FreeStation data streams to come in and allows filtering and error removal, integration with other data sets such as the Environment Agency API, integration with global forecasting models so that we can look at the variables into the future over the next week, as well as looking at the history of these variables, and visualization of data, management of the devices themselves, download of raw data, and various analyses that are specific to particular variables and to particular areas of interest. So I'll tell you a little bit about a couple of those later. So we have Smart River, Smart Soil, Smart Weather, Smart River. The analyses are focused on analysing the effectiveness of inline storage, natural flood management such as retention ponds, leaky dams, beaver dams, etc. And we have devices in all of those settings. Smart Soil is a turnkey solution for monitoring and assessing the effectiveness of soil storage of water under different forms of land management, such as conservation agriculture versus conventional tillage. And then Smart Weather is much more for characterising meteorological risks, but also
provides bankside guidance, allows photos to be linked to the data, prompts the user to report a potential pollution issue, makes the reporting of that issue easier, stores data in one place, presents that data in an easy-to-use interactive map, and makes the data available to anybody and everybody that wants it. So once you've registered onto the app, this is the home page. The top section is a map that locates the user. You've then got 4 buttons here for collecting 4 different kinds of citizen science data. There's also bankside guidance to help you collect that data. And there's also a profile which logs, which tabulates your data over time, so you can keep an eye on the health of your river. So if you have a look at the chemical tab first, you've got lots of parameters there that you can fill in. You can fill in one of those boxes or all of those boxes. There's trigger levels that sit behind this app, and once you hit the submit button, you'll either get a green light telling you your watercourse is okay, or if things are bad, you'll get a red light prompting you to call the Environment Agency. And if you press the telephone button, that dials your phone, your mobile phone, directly through to the EA straight away. Or you might get an amber light that says there is potentially a problem in the watercourse, and it prompts you to go for a wander upstream, if possible, to look for signs, visual signs, which will help you determine whether there is a problem or not. So if you wanted to do that, you click on the observation tab, and it takes you through to the observations page. And there's a list of the kind of things we're asking people to look for. There's further information. If you click that button there, you get a photograph and more of a description of what you're looking for to help you identify if there is a problem. And if you have an amber light and an observation, quite often it will kick you through to the red light again and prompt you to call the Environment Agency. Now you can use this alongside the chemical tab, or you can use this independently, this observation one independently. And the chemical tab and the observation tabs are sort of an on-the-spot river health. We've also included an invert tab, which is more longer-term river health check. And once you've done your kick sampling and you've got your bugs in the tray, this will help you identify through an artist drawing and a bit more of a description what you've got in the tray. Once you've recorded what you've got in the tray and you press submit, it calculates a score for you, and that score is plotted on a table over time, so you can monitor your watercourse over time. If you're a volunteer, just a small bit of watercourse you're looking at maybe. There's also an option just to record sightings of wildlife while you're out on the riverbank. So there's 4 different options there. Once you've submitted your data, it gets quality assured, and then it gets plotted onto an interactive map. This is on the Shropshire Wildlife Trust website. If you go onto the website and you zoom into the area you're interested in, click on the pin, you get a box pop up telling you the date and times data's been recorded and what that data was. So this is really new. It went live a couple of weeks ago. It's on the Apple and Android app stores. There's still lots of things that need ironing out. There's still a few little problems, but it's been very well received. And if it is successful, it's free to everyone to use. If it is successful and it does grow, then perhaps we might be looking for a national home for it in the future, because this was built in Shropshire for Shropshire, but we're happy for everyone to use it. And I'm happy to demonstrate it later if people want more information.
Hi. So I think most people probably know about Outfall safaris here. If not, a quick overview. It's a really robust and simple method for citizen scientists to go out and check their local waterways, ideally, for polluting outfalls, so surface water outfalls that have been misconnected. And the method was developed following the publication of this paper in 2015, which really looked to examine the issue of misconnections across the whole of the UK, but it sort of focused on various areas. And they found that it was a very diffuse problem. There wasn't any structure really in terms of identifying them, and the sort of biggest outcome was this clear need to develop a systematic procedure for identifying and reporting. So that led Joe Pecorelli, my boss, to develop this, along with Thames Water and the EA and various other people from Rivers Trust. And it was a great success, I hope, generally. And so I'm here to talk about the Outfall Safari Toolkit and how we can help the spread of this. So if you go onto the CaBA website, to this address here, you'll find a bunch of resources there which are entirely designed to help you through running your own Outfall Safari. So at ZSL, we coordinate all of them within London, so we're set for there, but we're hoping to really spread it elsewhere. And on there, you'll find a guide to running it. We also have loads of paper copies downstairs, so please feel free to take a copy for yourself and a copy for some friends or whatever. We want to spread the word as much as possible. There are a couple of technical manual guides there for setting up 2 different survey apps. I know we just heard about that one, but these ones are, again, the sort of form builder type ones that we were hearing about earlier, which are actually totally fine for this kind of survey. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. There's a case study, so you can go through what the Trent Rivers Trust did at Alfreton Book and how they reported it. And then there are resources to do with GIS online and how you might present it. There's also training presentations and volunteer handouts. Now, I've run 3 of these this year so far, and it's constantly evolving and learning, so I've got quite a few updates that I want to get out there, which I'll be doing in a few months, and then I'll be re-uploading those documents. But they're still, the bones will be the same, so that's fine. So these are the technical manuals for using the apps. I personally use Epicollect for mine, but if you want and you are more into using the ArcGIS that sort of application for showing your results and mapping your results for everyone, then the Survey 123 is good, but you do then have to pay for membership. It's not very much, especially for charities, which is good. But yeah, both work really well, and if you need more information on either, just come and speak to us. And again, the information's all there, and it talks you through it really well. So yeah, these are the other ones, and as I said, I'm going to be updating them because we have, so this is a bit of an output again of the mapping, which we've seen much like it today. But we have a Train the Trainer event coming up on the 4th of November, right? And so this is when I'm going to hopefully get all the updates in and done by. So if you know of anyone who might be interested and who wants to come, then please do spread it. You can, it's free to sign up for. Best to come in person if you can, but if it's a bit far away, then of course you can dial in. It's going to be at Aylesbury Sewage Treatment Works. So and there'll be sandwiches provided. I just had confirmed. Woohoo! And so, yeah, if you need more information on this, just come up to me after or email Michelle and we'll figure out a way to do this. But yeah, the take-home message is everything is available online. It should all be updated by the 4th of November. And yeah, there's loads of ways it can be applied. That's everything.
Okay, so whilst most of the presentations today have been sort of what can we do with data, what can scientists do, I'm interested more in what can farm advisors and farmers do with that data once it's available. So I'm doing my PhD and I chose sediment fingerprinting as one example of sort of catchment-based data that may in future be a really useful tool for farmers and farm advisors as well. So just to go straight into some data that I've collected. So I carried out an online survey questionnaire with 225 farmers across England, and I basically wanted to confirm that they are interested in receiving more hard evidence in future, and it turns out that they absolutely are. I suppose the main issue is the time constraints that both scientists and farmers are under. So this is why I've wanted to then have a look at an example of a complex approach, so sediment fingerprinting, and sort of find out how we can make it less time consuming and more engaging for farmers to sort of get a better understanding of this evidence themselves. So another caveat to it is they'd like to be shown hard evidence, but they don't want to be bashed. So these are some quotes from telephone interviews. So I've also carried out 65 telephone interviews with farmers across England. The surveys are also about a number of other topics that I'm covering. I don't have time to talk about it today, obviously. So, but these are just a couple of quotes I've pulled out. So it's just sort of covering that, you know, yes, we'd like to see the evidence so that when we get new regulations, we understand why. But we also don't want you to then use it against us in a sort of in a nasty way, essentially. So also it's really important when you are thinking about how to sort of translate scientific evidence, and also when you're giving advice or interacting with farmers or any other stakeholder, in fact, that is a non-scientist, that we sort of conceptualise and think of the attributes that we have to meet when we are communicating with other people. So I sort of discovered this framework which is based on boundaries research. So boundaries research originally was sort of about how do we sort of bridge the boundary between non-scientists and scientists, because we have very different epistemologies, different ways of communicating, and it's important that we sort of consider how we can get there. So the attributes that I think are most important are credibility, relevance, and legitimacy. So if you achieve these three things, and it sounds simplistic, but looking at my diagram, you can see that it isn't. And this is just a diagram I've made for farmers, so you could do it for any set of stakeholders that you want to engage with. So I'm sure you all understand why excess sediment is a problem, and Bob obviously gave it a shout out earlier, which is cool, because I think that sediment is actually it's a huge issue across the country. You know, the increased turbidity, decreased light penetration, and attached phosphates can lead to a myriad of issues and a cascade of ecological problems. So sediment fingerprinting is a really complicated approach, and it's done differently depending on the catchment, so every catchment is different. But essentially, you carry out field walks and you identify possible sources of excess sediment. You then collect samples from within the watercourse and from the sort of sites that you've identified yourself. You then do lots of complicated laboratory analysis, which I can talk to you about afterwards, or you can email my professor because he's an expert in it. And then you undertake sort of statistical tests to discriminate which traces or properties are most appropriate on the catchment. So Sometimes it may be particle size, other times it may be certain radionuclides. It really depends, which is actually a bit of a problem with the approach as well, because there's no standard approach that we can use, which means that when you talk to farmers, you have to sort of explain it in a sort of relatively simplistic way without misleading them. And because it's done differently every time, it can be quite difficult. So I am now, after carrying out my telephone interviews and online survey, I'm now holding focus groups throughout autumn and winter. If any of you have any good ideas on sort of how I can communicate the uncertainties that arise with sediment fingerprinting. So any scientific sort of data has uncertainties, whichever method you've used. So I'd love to hear from you about that, and I'm done. That will have to do.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with a quick background about the project and where we are now. So let's say with the increasing effect of environmental change, that is affecting our daily life, with the widespread problems affecting our rivers, lakes, wetlands, leading to pollution, species extinction, which are more and more represented in everything around us. Understanding that or solving the problem really require a catchment scale approach with working people and communities in partnership. So in that means is only by means of connecting people to the rivers surrounding area, we may be able to, let's say, deliver a sustainable change or and long-term benefits. So National Trust understand that, and under that approach, a group of aims and goals was built, but they are grouped in three big ones. So we are talking about rivers and catchments are healthy and clean. Rivers are easily accessed, valued, and loved by everyone, mainly for the new generation. And also the third one is build a national impact by sustainable long-term care for our river and catchment. It is a partnership project between National Trust, Environmental Agency, and Natural Resources of Wales. Where we are now, as the initial bid was rejected, but with the commitment of the partnership, the project started in phases. We have 3 phases. A group of catchments that already started and they are working on land. Second phase, a group of projects that is still to start within the coming months, but it depends on funding. And the third phase is their start is not yet confirmed. Again, achieving that, we are planning to work with or collaborate with local councils, river trust partners, education and research centers, water companies. All these, I think, should be involved. A group of monitoring opportunities here can be highlighted. I'm not going through that, but I think is a 5-year program would provide really good opportunities to go through that. Our monitoring approach, we try to structure that in 3 levels. The first one at the intervention on the level catchment, and here we are. What we are trying to do is basically looking at action interventions should focus on changes at the catchment scale, and here is what we are looking at. Is use these changes to see changes on land use management and habitat creation restoration. The monitoring at catchment level. Here, what we would like to measure how landscape scale change in regarding to tailor to interventions, and here we may talk about landscape biodiversity and intervention level, where the measure the efficacy of a specific method. Here we might talk about using wood for in-stream habitat enhancement. So here are a group of examples. I'm not going through all of them. This is for the pure catchment, as you can see. This is also for the boiling catchment, mainly most of them triggered by the diffuse pollution. And here is the Borlock Vale catchment. The interesting thing is the beaver introduction. I'm not sure if I have the time to go through that, but from that, I think is the most interesting thing is if I jump to this point where what is the current situation now and what we are trying to achieve from the beaver introduction. I'm stopping there. If you need more information, you can contact me, either myself or Stuart Clark or Ben Hardley. And thank you.
So you've gathered that I'm interested in urban environments and misconnections, and that's really what this is all about. Any old button? Yeah. So with a couple of my colleagues, volunteers in the Friends of Bradford's Becks, not Brooks, we've been interested in misconnections. And the first thing that happened was about 10 years ago, one of my PhD students discovered that you could use tampons to detect optical brighteners. And it kind of hit the news because it was such a glorious headline, glowing tampons. And so we thought we'd solved all the problems. It turns out it's not quite as effective as I thought it was at the time. You need a reasonably good ratio of sewage to water. It works best for working out where the misconnections in surface water outfall pipes are, actually, rather than rivers. But anyway, that was the first thing. We tried using this with volunteers in Bradford, moderately successful. So the next thing we did was employed somebody to go out with his dog and look at specific points on the river as often as he possibly could for about 6 months. And we found all sorts of things. We hit the headlines with curry pollution and all sorts of things. But the key point is here that we collected a lot of data, all visual observations and smell. And we found the river was polluted 32 out of 34 days when it was not raining. And that was good enough evidence to get something into the WINAP and into AMP7 for Yorkshire Water. So Yorkshire Water, on the basis of visual observations only, is being forced to do 2 projects on Bradford sewage. Okay, what's the characteristics of this stuff? Well, when you're dealing with misconnections, it's visible and opaque. It might be sediment, it might be mine drainage, it might be sewage. Several of these are sewage. But it's that kind of problem. The white one, food factory, not quite sure whether they're disposing of waste milk or who knows. But anyway, various things happen. So we thought, well, maybe we could just do it with a camera, because if you send volunteers out in the field, they frequently miss it. And it gets very disheartening. So we went to I guess if I press the button again, it would run. So this is Holbottom Beck. I've got a minute. So if you're a keen cyclist, you might have heard of the Queensbury Tunnel. It's a 5-kilometre long tunnel which the cyclists are trying to get opened up as a route through the mountain in West Yorkshire, and which Highways England want to close down. It's full of water. And so there's a contractor in there pumping it out. And he pumps it out into this tiny little stream. And it gets frequent sediment bursts in it. So let's see if we see it. Just keep your eye on it. There. Okay, and it's gone again. And then there are, I think, 2 more. There's another one. All right, this is all one day. All right, brilliant, isn't it? So this is the kind of, this is far better than trying to get out in the field and capture it. So just wait till it comes to an end. So what are we going to do next? So time-lapse cameras, we've used it for surface water outfalls with sewage pollution in them, but I couldn't get the video in. It's 300 megs, and I just could not make it work in here. So what we're doing next is that we're starting to think about using image analysis to detect the events, because looking through the video is actually a bit of a pain. We tried doing it with actually looking at the bed of the stream, but actually it's very unstable for the image analysis, and so we've started putting some targets in to see if we can use targets to actually calibrate the way we're doing it. The next thing we want to do, of course, make it online. Why on earth do a time lapse and have to go and take the card out? Let's have an online camera, and if we can do that, then we would hope to be able to trigger an alarm to a volunteer who can then check the footage, go out in the field, make sure it's real, and report it. So that's the progression we're going along. We have one or two other ideas, but this is about low-cost technology to find gross pollution problems and get them reported and fixed. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to my presentation. It's Atkins Catchment Science, and I'll be talking through the Fieldscale Monitoring Handbook. So first off, who am I? So up here I've put a picture of me perhaps looking less nervous. So I'm a new environmental scientist at Atkins in the Bristol office. I joined Atkins just under a year ago, so October 2018, and this was after finishing my PhD, which was based on the use of passive samplers for monitoring pesticides in water. So during this PhD, I looked at the molluscicide metaldehyde, which is being found in water courses across the UK, and I used the ChemCatcher passive sampler there on the right, which I developed myself for the monitoring of metaldehyde. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the Fieldscale Monitoring Handbook. So our handbook is a compilation of monitoring approaches that have been tried, tested, and even in some cases created through our experience working on a catchment and natural flood management NFM schemes. So all of these approaches have been designed to be generally low cost and easy to install, flexible enough to target individual measures, cover a range of different agri-environment and NFM measures, tried and tested. I know I've put that in twice, but it's very important. Transferable across different catchment projects, and focus on a hydrological and water quality parameters. So it's important to note that these are not prescriptive approaches, but are here to complement wider monitoring activities that are ongoing. So what does it look like, and why was there a need for it? So here is the front cover of the field notebook, and we wanted to create this to compile and share different approaches that can be used in catchment and natural flood management schemes, to try and help quantify the effectiveness of measures that have been implemented to either reduce the chemical input or flood risks, to help support the statutory monitoring requirements set by the EU and the Water Framework Directive, and it can act as a complement to the Citizen Science Manual, which has been published by the Rivers Trust. So let's have a look at what it looks like inside. So what we've done is we've got a 20-page document which covers 14 different monitoring approaches. Each one is taken up a page. On the left, we have the soil accumulator, which I believe, Bob Harris, you might be able to use that to try and see how much sediment is really running off the fields. And then on the right, we have the spot sample method. So what we've done, we've got a picture of each. We then go through the target measures, how it works, the materials that are needed in the construction, the average cost it would take to construct and utilize these, the deployment processes, the sampling strategies, and then some health and safety considerations. And also at the bottom we've put whether it's been tried and tested and whereabouts in the catchments and around the world it's been tried and tested. Finally, and probably most importantly, where can you find this? So fortunately for us, CaBA has actually put it up on their website. So I've put a link there at the top. If you want any more information on the Atkins Catchment Science, or even more information about the Fieldscale Monitoring Handbook, please feel free to contact either myself or Jay Neal and Dave Gasker-Tucker on the emails above. You can also find us on Twitter and on YouTube, or by simply Googling Atkins Catchment Science. I think I deserve 2 chocolates for being so well in time. Thank you.
So we've got Liz Chudaba from the Chesapeake Bay Monitoring Cooperative and the Alliance for the Bay Group in the United States to tell us about what they've set up there. And it's really, I want to do this presentation last because I find what they've done really inspiring, and I think it's where I'd like to see CaBA going in the next 5 to 10 years, but see what you think.
Hi everyone, I'm Liz Chudaba, the Director of Water Quality Programs at the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and the Program Manager for the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative. I'm going to talk about the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative and the citizen monitoring efforts in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. For those of you unfamiliar with the area, the Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the United States. The watershed spans 64,000 square miles, covering 6 states, including New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Citizen monitoring groups have been collecting data across this region for decades. However, until now, programs, methods, and QA protocols have varied from state to state. The goal of the CMC is to create a cohesive program using similar methods and procedures in order for data to be comparable across the region. The CMC was formed in 2015 by the Chesapeake Bay Program in order to fill spatial and temporal gaps in water quality data collected by the Bay Program Monitoring Network by including data collected by citizen or volunteer monitoring groups throughout the watershed. The Bay Program awarded a grant to the 4 partner organizations that make up the core CMC team: the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, or the Alliance, the Isaac Walton League of America, the Alliance for Aquatic Resource Monitoring, or ALARM, and the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, or UMCES. Each of these organizations acts as a service provider for different aspects of the program in order to integrate groups into the CMC partnership. The Alliance provides support for water quality monitoring in the lower watershed, and the Isaac Walton League provides support for benthic monitoring groups in the lower watershed. ALARM provides support for benthic and water quality monitoring groups in the upper watershed, and UMCES provides support for our Tier 3 audit process and data interpretation workshops. Currently, we have about 6 full-time staff through the 4 organizations and the Bay Program that make up the CMC team, with 5 other staff members working tangentially on the program. In addition to the grant from the Bay Program, each of our organizations has other funding sources to run our individual monitoring programs through other state or foundational grants. The vision of the CMC is to create a community where all data of known quality are used to inform watershed management decisions and restoration efforts at all levels across the region. Additionally, the CMC aims to be the bridge that connects monitoring groups to each other and to local, state, and federal agencies to amplify efforts and broaden impact. To accomplish this vision, the CMC first had to develop tools and resources that help monitoring groups break down the barriers to starting or maintaining monitoring programs. The first few years of the project were spent laying the foundation for the program. We held prioritization workshops throughout the watershed with state and federal agency personnel, local watershed groups, and other interested parties in order to identify gaps in monitoring, priority watersheds, and key parameters needed by state. This process is summarized in a prioritization report, which helps guide our outreach and targeting efforts in each state. We also conducted a census to assess monitoring efforts that were already occurring throughout the watershed. This helped us accumulate a list of commonly used methods and equipment, which informed the development of our user-friendly methods manuals, standard operating procedures, and quality assurance protocols. These products are openly available, and groups are welcome to adopt and use them for their own needs. Lastly, we developed a tiered framework to ensure consistency and quality of data between monitoring groups and across jurisdictions. The framework consists of 3 tiers based on quality assurance and rigor of monitoring programs, with Tier 3 being the highest tier. Additionally, and really most importantly, we have developed the Chesapeake Data Explorer, which is a centralized data hub to collect, store, and share data collected through the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative. The Data Explorer includes an interactive map that shows all of the sites that either have water quality or benthic macroinvertebrate data. And if you click on a site, you can see some basic data visualization plots based on the data available for that station. The Data Explorer also offers a query function that allows users to select and download data in the system. This feature makes it easy for each state and other end users to pull citizen data from our system to use for various purposes. Currently, we have about 20 groups uploading data to the Data Explorer and close to 90,000 water quality and benthic data points available. And we are continually working to incorporate data from other monitoring groups across the watershed. For more information about the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative, you can check out our website at www.chesapeakemonitoringcoop.org. Thanks!